What is your and everybody clapped story that is actually true? My high school hosted a talent show every year and each act had a limit of 3-5 mins. One kid was doing karate and this whole dance routine with it. We all loved this because before him there was about 1 million people singing and we were all very bored. We all thought it was good and enjoyed it, but then his music stopped and he motioned for them to keep going. He had already been at this for about 5 mins. Teacher and stuff were trying to tell him he needed to leave and get off the stage, but he didn't know much English and didn't understand them, so he just kept going. No music and we all started cheer and stuff. Then teachers went on stage to try and bring him off, and right then as a teacher was like literally trying to pull him off. It had been about 10-15 mins at this point. He started doing push-ups with 2 fingers, and then with just his thumbs. Then we all stood up and applauded, encouraging to keep going, and the guy in the music booth, who was also a high schooler, started playing his music again and he straight up did his act for like 30 minutes. By then school was ending and we all got to vote on our favorite act to perform again at our next assembly. He won by a landslide. In the first round of a huge, prestigious chess tournament, I got paired with the number 1 rated player, a foreign grandmaster. Most of the games took place in a giant ballroom, but the top 2 boards were in a separate room. A big audience sat and watched those 2 games. The moves were displayed on giant vertical boards that the audience could see. I was a pretty good player, but this was the first time I had ever played a grandmaster, and this guy was famous for being a world-class player, even better than most other grandmasters. The audience assumed he'd crush me. So did I. To shorten the long story, I played the game of my life. I got a good position, sacrificed some pieces to put his king in danger, and finally finished him off by threatening an unstoppable checkmate. The audience watched all of this on the giant board. When my opponent shook my hand, indicating that he was resigning, the whole audience started clapping. You rarely hear that at a chess tournament, and I certainly hadn't expected it. The applause may have bothered the guys playing on board too, but it didn't last long. There's a well-known story about an old-time grandmaster who played a winning move that was so brilliant, the spectators showered the board with gold pieces. That didn't happen for me, but the audience clapping for my upset victory was a perfect moment anyway. Freshman year in college. Life is good. Oldest professor in campus. 50 years teaching. Was a serious hardest and I handle stress with humor. So one day he comes into the classroom with his zipper down. People start chuckling and he proceeds with his class up to a point where he puts his foot on a chair to rest his leg, making the zipper gap wider. Chick on the seat closest to it turns red as a beet and people chuckle again. I raise my hand and he points at me. I ask him to come closer. He refuses and tells me to just spit it. I ask him once more to come closer. He gets upset and tells me that if it isn't pertaining to his lecture, I'll be given a written warning. I assure him that while not pertaining to class, he'd very much appreciate the information. He gets even more upset and tells me to cut the crap and share it with the class. People start losing it and chuckles become actual laughs. So I tell him his fly is down. Classroom erupts in laughter and everybody claps. He tells me that in 50+ years of teaching, it was the second time it happened to him. Needless to say, I dropped out and switched fields. It was competition season for choir. We're talking 3 days until UIL. Everyone was stressed. Everyone was losing their mind. Everyone hated each other at this point, and the choir director had been especially hard on us for the last 2 weeks. Every mistake was nitpicked and rehearsed over and over and over again. Anyways, we were halfway through after school practice and everyone just wanted to take a break. We were around 1.1/2 hours in at this point to give you reference. So we start up our Latin piece again and our director brings us in too early. She immediately stops the music and apologizes for the mistake. Now at this point I'm tired. I've been at school from 5:45 a.m. Don't you just love morning track practice? And it was almost 6 p.m. So somewhere in my thick skull I think it is okay to say, what do you mean? You're supposed to have it perfect at this point. Something she had said at some point that day. This is the point where everyone started clapping. I was the person to snap and say what no one else would. Now I don't know what has snapped in her at this point, but she started laughing really hard. Now I have a pretty dry, biting sense of humor, and she knows this considering I was a choir ambassador and would spend a lot of time helping out in the choir room, so she probably thought it was a good-natured joke. Anyways, the next day she was in a much better mood. She took me aside after class and told me that she baked me some muffins as a thank you for taking at least a little bit of stress out of that day for her. I got on the subway after finishing at the gym during rush hour in Toronto and leaned against a pole with a book in my hand for the 10-minute ride home. An older lady, late 50s early 60s, ran through the closing doors to get on the car and accidentally bumped into a guy who was already on the train. The fairly well-built guy, obviously having finished a long day working construction, turned on the lady and started yelling and berating her for running into him. After 15-20 seconds of him berating her and her cowering against a wall, I figured she'd had more than enough and called out to the guy, "Okay man, she gets it. Calm down." The guy finished yelling at her and turned on me to threaten and yell at me. I was going to the gym not because I'm a big gym buff but because a 6'6" fat guy, so I wasn't terribly concerned for my safety. He kept yelling at and threatening me until we got to the next station while I was trying to calm him down. When we got to the next station I decided I'd had enough. I put my book in my back pocket and yelled back at him, "Okay asshole, you want to fight? You want to fucking fight? Let's go. Off the fucking train. Let's go asshole." He eagerly said yes and stepped off the train and onto the platform so we could fight. I pulled my book back out and leaned back against the pole intending to watch the train doors close in front of him and then leave him there. Everyone on the train laughed and clapped. That'd make for an awesome story if that's where it ended, but unfortunately we were stopped at that station for an abnormally long time, and after a few moments he just got back on the car even more incensed after being embarrassed. Several people got ready to intervene if needed and one girl at the other end of the car hit the panic strip. The cops came fairly quickly and escorted him off the train and out of the station. I had several people tell me that they were ready to back me up if needed, but as I told them, I never had any intention of getting into a fight. I just wanted to deflect his attention from the old lady. I'm big enough to give most people pause and experienced enough to hold my own if they don't. This has turned into one of my very favorite stories to tell over the years, and most of my friends are sick of it after having heard it 3 or 4 times. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.